Today, I'm going to be teaching Merlin how to pick up his feet. This is one of the last basic gentling skills that Merlin needs to know before he goes off to his next home. Now, he's really learning to pick up his feet out of order compared to the other horses. The reason for this is that I wanted to make sure that Merlin was as prepared as he could be for this. Early on in Merlin's training, he had a really big setback and was terrified of ropes. He was often very reactive and so fearful I had trouble getting through to him. I was able to start gaining his trust back using positive reinforcement. I still had to teach him pressure and release, and helping him identify passive versus active body language really helped. I slowly reintroduced the rope, all the while starting and ending my sessions with positive reinforcement to try to get him in the correct frame of mind. We had some pretty big challenges that we just had to work through, and when he finally discovered what the answer was, things got a lot easier. His trust started to grow and he became more and more confident. His sweet and quiet disposition began to shine through, and he was ready for new things like tying and wearing the surcingle. The big change came when he moved to my domesticated horse barn. Here he's starting to reveal his personality even more. He's become a lot more brave and allows new people to handle him. Because I knew Merlin was capable of having some pretty large meltdowns, I wanted to make sure that he was in a really good frame of mind before I got underneath him to pick up his feet. Today is my first day working towards picking up Merlin's feet. I start out by just rubbing his legs. I want to be able to rub his legs without asking him to pick up his hoof. Once he's more comfortable with me rubbing his legs and not trying to snatch the leg from me, then I'll ask him to pick up his hoof. You can see he's a bit uncomfortable with touch, and I'm just consistently rubbing him until he stops, and then I give him that release and move back up his body. Repetition is key here. I head back down to rub his legs, and he stood for me, so I went right back up. Although I'm working on his legs, I don't want to put too much attention on them. That's why I'm retreating and going to another part of his body, whether that's his neck or his hindquarters. Right now I'm working towards a goal, and that's picking up Merlin's feet. It's really easy to get into that direct thinking and become very focused on that goal, but that can be really intimidating for the horse, as it really is a lot like a predator hunting its prey. That's why I'm constantly retreating and moving to other parts of his body, so it's a little bit less intimidating for me going towards the legs. That being said, there's a lot of retreating and moving towards other parts of his body. For the sake of condensing this video, I'm going to be cutting a lot of that out. Once he was letting me rub his legs, I decided to ask him to pick up his hoof. He tried pulling it from me several times, but I just held it until he relaxed and then gave him the release.
That was so good.
This is exactly why I've waited for Merlin to get into this sort of headspace. When he pulls away, I'm able to hold his leg until he relaxes it. That wouldn't have happened earlier on. In the past, Merlin had quite a few meltdowns, and picking up the leg and holding it when they try to get it free is a perfect setup for a meltdown. Right now he's nervous about this and probably pretty confused, but he's nowhere near meltdown. The other thing that is more challenging for Merlin is being tied in the barn. Although I'm using a blocker tie ring and it's really not a lot of pressure to be able to pull that rope through that ring, it still adds a feeling of confinement. I had to judge if Merlin was ready for that confinement as I tried picking up his leg and holding it. Now, I chose to do it this way because I prefer to have someone holding the horse when I first do this, and I didn't have any assistance, so that's why I chose to tie him using that blocker tie ring. I really want to emphasize that this was a very calculated decision, and I did a lot to prepare Merlin for this. If me from a year ago was watching this video, I would have totally judged myself for this. Normally, this would have been something that I taught outside in an open area where the horse can move around. Choosing to do something like this in a confined space has a lot of red flags in it. If I had tried this earlier with Merlin, I can guarantee he would have had a meltdown, pulled the rope through, ran out the back door, and been traumatized for weeks. I weighed these risks carefully. At this point, I know Merlin very, very well, and he's now in a much better headspace than he had been in previous weeks and months.
Good boy. Big blow.
So after I had worked on picking up his leg, I decided it was time to move forward and try to pick out that hoof. Now, when picking out a Mustang's hoof for the first time, it's very likely to find thrush, and usually it's pretty bad.
Oh my gosh. Bad thrush here.
Merlin was no exception, and I caught scent of that thrush right away. When Merlin starts getting uncomfortable, I try to hold his leg, wait for him to relax, and then release. Now, what I don't want is for Merlin to actually pull his leg from me. So I have to pay close attention to his comfort level, and if he's getting too nervous, I have to judge carefully and try to give him a release when he's being relaxed. Now, if I had gone back to picking out his foot after he relaxed, it's very likely that he would have tried to pull it from me again, and perhaps bigger that time around, and maybe even have broken it free from my grasp, and I really don't want that. Frequent releases are key here. Another thing that I like to do is give a release even if the horse hasn't ever pulled. Trying to get ahead of them and give releases before they pull away is really beneficial. I think it helps them to understand that when you grab their foot, you're not grabbing it for forever, and you're going to keep giving that release, and that they just have to stand there for that. Here, I honestly got a little bit greedy trying to pick out that hoof, so I probably held this for longer than I should have. He got nervous and tried to pull away, so I just held that and then gave him the release when he relaxed. This is the product I use to treat thrush. If you know someone with a horse, this is probably a great stocking stuffer. I know I'd be overjoyed to get something like this in my stocking. Anyway, it's important to treat the thrush as soon as I can. Thrush is a bacterial infection that occurs in the hoof, usually around the frog, and it can cause soreness. The pain and sensitivity in the hoof can cause a horse to be protective of its legs and feet. This might cause even a domesticated horse to pull away when you're trying to pick up its feet. So imagine what that might do to a wild horse you're trying to train. Now, I'm not saying that Merlin is sensitive due to the thrush right now, but I definitely want to treat it so that it's not a hindrance. I'm now moving on to his left front leg, and I'm going to repeat the process that I did on the right side. When Merlin tries to pull, I hold his leg and then release when he relaxes. Now, if Merlin really wanted to pull away, he most certainly could. I am no match compared to him. When I hold his leg, I really try to make sure my hand is on his hoof, where he can't feel my grasp. I don't want to be inadvertently putting pressure on his leg and making things worse for him. I'd say Merlin's doing pretty well on this side, so I started just patting his hoof down and then gave him that release. Again, I want to give him lots of little releases and don't ask too much of him. I felt like he was handling this really well, so I brought my hoof pick a little closer in case he was ready for me to pick out his hoof. Merlin seemed like he wanted to watch what was going on. This is something that Jagger does occasionally too. Here, I made the conscious decision to push him a little bit. Even though he pulled away and then relaxed, I didn't give him that release right away. Instead, I asked him for a little bit more and started picking out his hoof. He pulled away a second time, and this time I gave him the release after he relaxed. Since he was being so inquisitive, I let him smell my hoof pick, which now had the smell of thrush on it. If you haven't smelled it before, it only takes experiencing it once to be able to recognize that foul odor. It is pretty unpleasant. I was able to make some progress towards picking out this hoof. The lighting makes it difficult to see, but I was getting a first-hand glimpse of just how long the walls of his hoof were. You might have noticed it when I was working on his right hoof, as the lighting was a little bit better and you could see that. Just a quick reminder in case you forgot, I do rub him over between each time I ask him to pick up his hoof. So all in all, I'd say Merlin is doing really well on his first day of picking out his feet. Hopefully you guys enjoy this style of taking a deeper look into what a training session is like and seeing how quickly progress can be made. There are other days that it's a lot of repetition and the same thing over and over and over again. So it's really fun to have days like this where you can really see tangible progress. He moved right along in this session and definitely exceeded even my own expectations. I treated his left front for thrush and then called it a day. I'm going to work a few days on his front feet before moving on to his hind feet. Right now, picking up his front feet is going to be part of his morning and evening routine. After doing this for even just a couple days, we saw great progress. And this is where we were after a few days of practicing picking up his feet. He obviously needs a little bit more work, and I'd like to see him a little bit more relaxed as I do this, but look at this progress. I can't even tell you how rewarding this is. because there were some really challenging times, especially when Merlin had that setback. There were weeks that I really struggled with him and wondered if I could do it. I had a lot of self-doubt, and I was definitely at times wondering if I ruined him. After now working with several Mustangs, Merlin is number 4, Jager's number 5, I now feel a lot more confident. Each horse has taught me a little something new, and I feel like I've really gotten comfortable with trusting the process. And by process, I really just mean that the journey has a lot of ups and downs, and I've just gotten more comfortable with that. My process involving methods and techniques is always changing and will continue to change. I'm probably going to watch this in a few months and be horrified by what I'm doing and yeah, I'd be doing something different. Although he's made quite a bit of progress here, I still have a lot to do to prepare him for the farrier. I brainstormed a list of some things that I want him to be able to do and be comfortable with before my farrier arrives. There's a lot more to it than just picking up the horse's feet, so I'm going to turn that into its own video, and I'll hopefully have that out pretty soon. Alright, so now it's time to work on his back legs. My goal is to be able to pick up his hoof for even just a split second. I'll release it the moment that he lets me hold it without trying to pull it from me. Now right here, I'm maintaining a constant pressure because he tried to pull it from me. He is making his own release because he was able to pull it from me, but the act of me just reaching for it is continuing to put a form of pressure on him. This is just my imperfect thought process. I think this is more true for a wild Mustang in training versus a domesticated horse. With a wild Mustang, you can look at them or walk towards them or move an arm, and it's a form of pressure that a domesticated horse may not feel, at least to the same extent. In a nutshell, I'm basically trying to say that what I'm doing is not a perfect form of keeping pressure on him, but I think it is a form of pressure, and so he is still feeling that release when he does what I'm looking for. If you're new to my channel, pressure and release is a form of training called negative reinforcement. Basically, you put a form of pressure on the horse, which could be physical or mental, and then you take that pressure away when they've done the correct thing. So the horse is learning from that release of pressure. It's a simple concept, but it can be more complex. Sometimes we put pressure on a horse unintentionally, and then they react to the pressure that we put on, but then they do a behavior that we don't like because we put the pressure on. Other times we may not be releasing appropriately, and the horse becomes dull to our pressure because we're not giving appropriate releases. Horsemanship is really an art form, and these Mustangs have been really helpful for me becoming more and more self-aware, seeing my own errors, and trying to improve upon them. Like they say, horses don't lie, and that's really true for Mustangs. I know it's said that horses are often a reflection of ourselves, and on one hand that sounds cheesy, but on the other it is 100% true. This whole idea was really the driving force of me naming my channel The Project Equestrian. I remember the day that I landed on that name. I was so excited. Now this was before I dove into Mustangs, but at the time I was just bubbling with passion and enthusiasm over the realization of how responsible we are for our own horse's behavior. The term project horse is thrown out so much, and it basically represents a horse needing more work. Usually the horses needing more work have some kind of behavioral problem. But in a lot of cases, when you take that close look, maybe the horse is responding appropriately to what the human is doing. Horses are always learning, whether they're learning what we call good things or what we call bad things. They're always learning. And sometimes we teach them the wrong things. It was me coming to the realization that we as humans initiated this relationship with horses. They didn't ask to be domesticated or, in this case, rounded up and integrated into a human lifestyle. It was that humble realization that we were responsible for initiating that relationship, and therefore we really need to study the horses and understand them and learn and grow and learn how to communicate effectively in a way that they understand. If there's an undesired behavior, it takes some reflection and looking into why the horse is responding that way, and looking into what are the things that we're doing that might be eliciting that response. Now, there are probably 1,000 different things in here that I'll be able to pick apart in probably just a few short months. But that's okay, because one of my goals is to be able to look back on my videos and cringe. Cringing is a really good thing because it shows growth. and it means that you've gained some knowledge and would now do things differently. I have a really hard time watching my old videos because I do cringe so much. And I think this one right here, I am definitely going to be cringing on pretty soon. That was literally my third time picking up his hoof. Third time. Okay, I literally hijacked my own video by going on that little rant. And that was not at all what I had in mind for this video, but now you know me a little bit better and what gets me excited. So thank you for watching.